He follows a guy named Will, who wakes up to find he has fewer than 24 hours remaining on his timer. He connects with his mother, Rachel, who is celebrating her 50th birthday. However, their jubilation is clouded by financial anxieties, as Rachel learns she only has 3 days left on her schedule and reminds Will of the debts and loans they need to pay. Will tells her that he'll find the money. Rachel states she'll be away for 2 days working and promises to return alone. She directs Will to meet her at a bus station to discuss extending the deadline before parting ways. She gives Will 30 minutes to enjoy a decent lunch. He bids her farewell with a kiss before departing for work. Along the way, he encounters Maya, a young girl who requests a moment of his time. He graciously grants her 5 minutes. Before continuing on his way to work, he joins his friend Burrell at the factory, where they build time storage devices. After a hard day, he clocks out and receives his salary only to discover it was less than planned. He argues for more, but the distributor warns him that the quota has increased and he hasn't reached it later at a local bar. Some men invite him to bet, but he resists, reminding one of them that he owes him an hour. He claims the owing time before meeting with Burrell, who is inebriated, and points out a man who has been buying drinks for everyone, indicating that he has almost a century in his time account. He detects someone studying the man Henry and chooses to warn him. He tells the man to leave because he's drawing too much attention, but he refuses. Then a bunch of males enter, causing everyone in the pub to start racing out. Burrell explains to Will that they're Minutemen, a bunch of gangsters infamous for robbing and extorting. Despite Bell's efforts to drag him away, Will decides to stay and observe, and Burrell leaves him behind. The group leader, Forrest, approaches Henry and demands his time, even offering him the opportunity to fight for it. Henry looks ill and rushes to the restroom, where he vomits while being watched by one of the Minutemen. He suddenly comes in, knocks out the guard, and takes Henry with him. They flee the tavern with Forrest and his men in pursuit. They manage to escape after climbing over a barrier and hiding behind an abandoned building. The Minutemen nearly catch up to them, but eventually give up. One of the men recognizes Will, leading to meetings between Henry and Forrest. Henry admits he's 105 years old and bored of living, which shocks Will, who is unhappy that he and his mother have to work numerous jobs simply to survive. Henry then tells the grim truth of their world. The affluent purposefully boost the cost of living to keep the poor dying off during more time for themselves. He emphasizes that there's plenty of time for everyone, but greed blinds the rich and powerful. To this fact, Henry asks Will what he would do with his time if he had as much as Henry. Will asserts he wouldn't squander it. Like Henry, after some contemplation, they rest in the morning. Henry decides to give almost all his time to Will. Keeping only 5 minutes for himself, after a while, Will wakes up and discovers he has over a century. In his time, he looks for Henry and sees him sitting atop a bridge as Henry's final seconds count down, and he smiles. Falls into the river. Later, Will heads to Burrell and sees Bell's wife Greta holding their newborn baby. Will asks for Burrell, and he reveals to him the time he has. Will talks about the events of the night before, and Burrell asks what he plans to do. Now that he has learned the truth, Will intends to bring justice before leaving. Will gives Burrell his fortune with his fortune. Burrell eyes the bar on the other side of the street. Meanwhile, Rachel pays a loan of 2 days and attempts to ride the bus, but finds that she can't afford the fare as the prices have gone up. She begs with the driver and the passengers, but everyone looks aside, feeling desperate. She starts running. The two are in a race against time, and with every second and every stride, death looms closer for Rachel. Finally, they see each other. They escape as fast as they can, but death beats Rachel, leaving her lifeless. Rachel falls into Will's arms. Will weeps, knowing they were simply seconds away from having the life they've always wanted. Will now has all the time he's ever wanted, but his mother has none. The following day, timekeepers retrieve Henry's body from the river. Raymond, the senior timekeeper, and Jorger, his subordinate, investigate the situation as they're about to leave. Raymond sees a camera on top of the bridge. Meanwhile, Will sits inside a car wearing a new suit and a new look on his face. They leave the time zone, a border that separates the different social classes on his trip. They pass multiple borders, paying a toll fee that increases with each one. The last border costs Will a year, and the driver, welcomes him to the city of New Greenwich. The driver asks, Will what his true intentions are for coming to New Greenwich, and Will answers he wants to make the people of New Greenwich pay. The city is entirely different from what Will is used to as he exits the car. He immediately starts running, still used to living with little time. He looks at his arm and starts acting more like a person who has all the time in the world. However, he already caught the attention of a woman named Sylvia. Will enters a hotel and asks for a suite in his luxurious room. Will wakes up still with 105 years, even though he lies down in the comfiest of beds in a room with the best view. The untimely death of his mom still haunts him for the first time in his life. He experiences gourmet food and drinks, he pays for his meal, and tips the waitress a week. The waitress notices that Will doesn't act like everyone else, saying he does everything a little too fast. Will cheekily replies that he doesn't finish. Fast in the things that matter, Will plans to enter the casino. But first he has to have a wardrobe change in the Timekeeper headquarters. They see Will in the surveillance footage. Joa reports that a man crossed multiple borders en route to New Guinea. They gather more information about Will on the computer, and Raymond states that he knows Will's father Will on the computer, and Raymond states that he knows Will's dad will enter a casino and sits at a poker table as the dealer deals Philippa, a billionaire, with Ian, who in his time acquaints himself with Will's winnings. After a few rounds of poker, which total to almost 2 centuries, Philip boosts the pot by 50 years. Despite this, Will calls with absolute conviction, and the river turns out to be the 6 diamonds. Will's focus goes from the game to the attractive dame. Sylvia, who sits next to Philip, draws up his sleeves, revealing almost 10 millennia worth of time. He then talks about the immeasurable difference between the poor and the rich, rationalizing it as natural selection. He rises 2 more centuries, bites and calls, leaving his arm with a scant 30 seconds left. The verdict favors Will, and he receives a millennium. This added a thrill to Philip's humdrum life. He observes Will looking at Sylvia and asks if he believes she's his grandma, mother, or wife. He merely says that she's stunning. Felipe identifies her as his daughter, and she invites him to a party the next day. He purchases a beautiful new car with his money, which he drives to Philip's residence. There, he's introduced to 3 generations of women that look as if they're sisters and will look out of place among the high-class throng. Sylvia approaches and saves him from a lonely night. They get to know more about one another, and their chat takes them to the dance floor. She asks him whether he came from the ghetto, but will neither admit nor refute her accusations. Sylvia opens up to him about her useless life and how the time that she has chains her when it's intended to provide her freedom. While this is occurring, Philippe and her wife stare at the two with cautious eyes, forcing Will to bring Sylvia outside to the beach, and Sylvia undresses and dives into the waters. They float on the ocean naked and inches apart, with the moonlight beaming on their arms. Sylvia isolates herself, but the waves drive her closer to him. Suddenly, someone cries out from the shore, disturbing the romantic moment they return, and Philippe asks Will to join him for a round of poker. However, the Timekeepers burst in and confront Will. They sit him in an office, and Raymond announces himself. He asks him why he's in New Greenwich and how he has over a millennium's worth of time. Will reacts honestly, explaining that Henry handed it to him, committing suicide in the process. Raymond doubts his explanation, seizes his time, and arrests him as he leaves. He asks him why he examines suicide when murders happen in the ghetto every day. Raymond is astonished by his statement, which reminds him of Will's father. He then attacks the Timekeepers guarding him and rushes out to hold Sylvia captive. They enter through the kitchen, and the two drive off in his automobile. A vehicle pursuit starts, and Raymond ramseys Will's car, forcing them to lose control. Maneuvers while on reverse, barely dodging an incoming truck, they lose the Timekeepers and hide underneath a bridge. Will asks for Syl's time, but she refuses. Morning comes, and they drive along the highways and run over traffic spikes, the tire punctures, and they crash Forus, and his men approach the unconscious couple. He siphons time from Sylvia, but they leave in a hurry. Leaving her with 30 minutes, will give her a few minutes, and they run off to get more time. With 3 minutes left, will knock on Belle's door. Greta answers and informs Will that Burrell has died due to alcohol poisoning. Sylvia is in worry, as she just has a handful of minutes left. Will discover her earring, and they run to the jewelry dealer, seeing that they're desperate. He underpays them and promises only 2 days. Will accept, and they immediately hide as they hear the timekeeper sirens. They go through the city talking about Sylvia's family company. Will asks how much they're worth, and she says it's too much to the point where, knowing it won't matter, he phones Raymond and begs for Philippe to transfer 1,000 years to the ghetto city in return for Sylvia. Raymond warns him that if he continues, he'll end up dead like his father. He believes his father died fighting someone, but Raymond says Will's dad was doing something more dangerous. Night comes, and Sylvia makes herself at home at Will's flat. She asks about his family, and Will tells her of her mother's death. He reminisces about his father and how he was a gambler like him, but on a different game. His father would play a game close to gambling. But using his time, his father won a lot. But his acts of generosity caused his death. They discover out they're approximately the same age, and their friendship develops stronger as they learn more about each other's past. Dawn arrives, and he observes if Philippe sticks up his half of the arrangement, he will see no time transfers, leaving Sylvia upset with her father. Despite not obtaining the time, he still intends to let Sylvia leave. He walks her to the phone booth, offering her a rifle as a farewell gift. She returns the favor with a kiss. She calls her father and berates him for not delivering what he wants. As they chat, Will is behind her, ignorant of Raymond's pointing a gun at him. Sylvia turns and sees Raymond, and without hesitation she shoots him and holds a gun at a wounded Raymond. But instead of taking his time, he gives some to Raymond, and the two drive off using his car. The two are stopped on the side of the main road, and Sylvia asks whether he has any intentions since they're in a patrol car. They play the part of a timekeeper blocking an unfortunate driver. Sylvia gets too comfortable with the rifle and fires a shot, terrifying Will, and the driver steals from the passenger and flees with the new vehicle. Later that day, the two sat in the back vehicle and watched the news about them. It will explain that she can still return to her father, but Sylvia doesn't want to return to her monotonous life and will lean in for another kiss. Philip now has time to accomplish more than just that. In his office, he talks to his partners and assures them that he didn't pay the ransom. They question his talents to settle this situation, but Raymond enters the room before Philippe gets a chance to explain himself. He tells Philippe about her daughter not wishing to be saved. Philip apologizes and explains his daughter's intransigence to Stockholm Syndrome. Raymond does not budge, and he informs him that he intends to arrest his daughter. Philippe tries to pay him with his time, but Raymond remains indifferent and leaves. The next day, Will teaches Sylvia how to shoot a gun properly. They chat about Will's intention to offer time to the people, and she claims that she can assist him in getting the time he needs at the local lending company. A truck suddenly crashes through the glass windows. The two pull off a heist, snatching as much time-storing devices as they can. They encourage the borrowers to get as much time as they like, and they all come storming in later that day. Will offers time to Greta Maya and even the timeline distributor, who lends people time as charity. Forrest continues to harass and kill individuals for time. He then sees on display a prize for 10 years for the capture of Will and Sylvia, as Philippe watches the news about his daughter's persistent endeavors to steal from him. Later that night, Raymond and the timekeepers surround a motel where the two stay. Will and Sylvia notice they're encircled, so they jump about the window to escape. Raymond follows them through the streets and dark alleyways. They make their way to the roofs, and a gunfight commences. They manage to board a bus, losing Raymond. Forrest continues his search for Will and Sylvia. He interrogates a group, threatening to steal their time. When one dies, a man jumps up and says he has information regarding their whereabouts at the motel. The two sat on the couch together, chatting about the obstacles they're about to confront. They both accept that if they get caught, they will die at the period they've spent together. And at every time they almost died, Sylvia felt more alive than ever. Suddenly, the door gets knocked down by Forrest, and his soldiers feel generous. Forrest gives Will a chance to play for his life. Forrest rolls up his sleeves for a game of strong arms, and he will accept his challenge. Will struggles up to his final seconds. Then he flips it around when Forrest loses. Focus his subordinates as they approach the table, and the dread in his eyes rises. He will grab a gun from his ankle and shoot everyone while siphoning. Fortis, Dry Will, and Sylvia stand on a rooftop, seeing how prices keep rising. Dry Will feels despondent, claiming that the rich will merely increase the cost of living every time they steal. He thinks that only 1,000,000 years will make a difference. Sylvia agrees, but she has a plan in mind. The next day, Philippe enters a building with a multitude of security guards surrounding him. Vivia captures their attention and asks for this father. Among the guards is Will, who points a gun straight at Philippe's head. He tells the guards to put their weapons down, and they take Philippe captive. In his office is a time vault, and there sits a device with 1,000,000 years. Philippe tries to explain that civilization will fail if the time falls into the wrong hands. He says that there will always be someone willing to sacrifice humanity for a shot at immortality. He couldn't control his rage and aimed a revolver at him, but he regained his composure. He warned Philippe that being immortal isn't worth sacrificing even one life. Then they both left. Meanwhile, police vehicles blocked the main route. The Timekeepers fired at Will and Sylvia's car, but nevertheless they managed to pass through without any harm, slamming through the toll booth to cross the border. Raymond persevered in chasing them. They reached the ghetto, and they were almost safe when Raymond caught up and plowed into them. Will emerges unscathed and asks Maya to share the 1,000,000 years. Raymond shoots a gun at them, but the noise from the crowd conceals his view, allowing them to escape. Raymond steals a car, and the pursuit follows. Ultimately, they face one another on the road. Raymond acknowledges his slum background and belief in keeping money. Gap. During their talk, Raymond understands his time is running out and dies abruptly. Will and Maya try to figure out how to recharge their time, spying Raymond's car in the distance. With little time left, they hurry toward it. Will reaches there first and receives his time, then goes to Sylvie, who is almost out of time. They embrace just in time. Assuring they live another day, citizens start crossing borders into more affluent places, causing the hierarchical hierarchy to dissolve, witnessed by the Minutemen. Sylvie and Will continue their pattern, heading for a massive time bank at the end. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you on the next video.